this morning is taken from chapter 5, from verse 1. Therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Through him, we have also obtained access by faith into this grace in which we stand. And we rejoice in hope of the glory of God. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us.
Thank you, Rose. Good morning, everyone. It is nice to be back in church this week, although obviously it's not the same. We're looking out on nobody, and it's very cold because I haven't turned the heating back on because that costs money. But I am now going to turn the heating back on because here we are, and it is freezing. So I look like I'm dressed for the winter, and there's a heat wave outside, but here we are, and we're carrying on. Next week, I promise I'll be in shorts. The bonus of filming virtually is I can wear anything below the waist, and I'm currently wearing joggers, which is a relief to you all because it means I'm very comfortable and a little bit warmer. But there are many things that aren't good about live streaming. The obvious one is we're not together as a family. My biggest issue with live streaming is, what do I do with my hands? Like, I find there's something about iPhones and the way things record that hands seem to be emphasized. They seem unusually large, and when I watch anything, I can't stop looking at people's hands. And sometimes you get people that haven't given any thought to hands, and they're kind of sounding like a penguin, and it looks like half their body's not there. Other people have overthought their hands, and it looks like they're directing air traffic, and it's very confusing, and all I can do is look at people's hands. And if you were to turn the sound off, you'd think that they were so excited and passionate that they found the vaccine for COVID-19, but you turn the sound on and all they're really talking about is the fact they've worked out how to use YouTube Live. Some people overthink it. Some people really make hands count, like they know what they're doing with their hands. They've been told what to do, probably by an expert, and the hands are communicating something. Now, whatever you thought about Bodder last week at 7 p.m, or however confusing you found his message, there was one thing that was loud and clear throughout the whole message, as it looked like he was going 12 rounds with Anthony Joshua. He knew what he was doing with his hands because he was communicating one thing, and the one thing was this: the battle is not over. We're still in a fight, and we need to keep on fighting. We can't let our guard down now. And so I wonder this morning, how did that make you feel when you watched Boris's statement last week? I'll be honest, I felt utterly deflated. In my head, I knew that he wouldn't be saying anything of particular significance in terms of life getting back to normal. But I guess in my heart, I was kind of hoping that there might be a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I was hoping that we might have something that we can cling on to that will kind of help us in the next phase as we look to getting things back to normal. But the overriding message that came through was the simple fact that things are going to take a lot longer than we originally thought. I was hoping for some good news, because the reality is there's a lot of bad news around at the moment. In fact, lockdown has caused a lot of bad news, and it's not insignificant bad news, it's incredibly significant, and it has a profound effect on our life and on our emotions and how we're feeling. In our own church family, people who have been a part of our family from a long time have lost loved ones because of this disease, and it's tragic, and it hurts, and it results in a lot of sadness. Other people in our family have lost their job as a result of COVID-19, and it's tragic, and it hurts, and it feels uncertain. Others of us, their job is kind of on the fence as to whether they will have a job to go back to, and it's unsettling, and it's uncertain, and it causes anxiety. For other people, your relationships are suffering, whether it's simply the fact that you can't go and see close relatives, or whether it's as extreme as the relationships in your house are no longer safe, and as a result you're stuck in the house with someone you don't feel safe with, and it's tragic, and it's anxiety inducing, and it hurts, and it's sad. And even those of us who haven't experienced the extreme of this lockdown, all of us watching now and watching later on the recorded YouTube will have experienced a loss of freedom as a result of this virus. And the reality is none of us like suffering. We all want to minimize suffering. We all want suffering to end at some point. We need hope to cling to. We need a light at the end of the tunnel. But the problem with this pandemic is that the very nature of this virus is the fact that we are powerless to make it go away. There is no end in sight. As I think about the church, we're not going to be back together as a church family anytime in the near future. And that's incredibly sad. And it inevitably affects our joy, it affects our peace, it affects our ability to be able to go through this next phase as things start to slightly lock down, but we realise things really aren't the same as they were before. So my question this morning, and the question I want to answer this morning, is what does our faith have to say about this scenario we find ourselves in? What does Christianity have to say about these moments of prolonged suffering that we all inevitably go through at different points in our life? And here's the thing about Christianity. What Christianity says about suffering is utterly unique. Now, there's no gradations of unique. You're either unique or you're not. But just to emphasize the point, what Christianity says about joy in moments of suffering is utterly unique. Here's what Paul says in Romans 5, the passage we just had read from Rose, verses 3 and 4. He says more than that, so more than just rejoicing when times are good, which we all do. We can all rejoice and have joy when times are good. Verse 3, more than that, he says, we rejoice, Christians rejoice in our sufferings. We rejoice in our sufferings. Why? Because we know that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and we all need hope. How on earth can Paul say that? How can Paul say that no matter what's going on, no matter what kind of suffering you're experiencing, you are still able to rejoice, you're able to have joy, you're able to be happy in and amongst suffering? What on earth could possibly make him be able to say something so ridiculous as that? How is it possible? Well, first, let's establish what Paul does and doesn't mean when he's talking about Christians being able to rejoice in suffering. Here's what he doesn't mean. Paul doesn't mean that Christian rejoicing in suffering is stoicism. What he doesn't say there in verse 3 is he says Christians rejoice even though they suffer. He's not talking about this kind of idea that if we just pull our socks up, if we can just manage to use some positive thinking and ignore all the suffering that's going on, we're going to be okay. We're going to be able to rejoice. It's not stoicism in the worst Christian sense. It's not looking at something like this pandemic and ignoring everything that's going on, ignoring everybody that's dying on a daily basis as a result of this tragic disease and just saying it's going to be okay. We're Christians. We're supposed to be happy. Everything's going to be fine, and completely ignoring the reality of the situation. That is not Christian rejoicing. In fact, that is fake joy that's totally detached from reality. And the result is what we communicate if we ever do rejoice or propagate any kind of rejoicing in that sense as a Christian thing, is it promotes this idea that God really doesn't care. He doesn't care that you're suffering. He's completely indifferent to your suffering. He has no compassion of your suffering, of you in your suffering, and instead he just says, just be happy. We know that that is not a good thing. And we know that it's not Christian, because as you look at Jesus throughout the Gospels, one thing you realize is he deeply cared about the suffering he came across in the world. The word compassion that's so often used in the Gospel literally means his gut would move when he saw people suffering. Jesus cries a lot in the Gospels because he connects on this deep emotional level with suffering. So what's Paul saying? Paul isn't saying that Christians rejoice even though they're suffering. He's not talking about kind of a stoicism here. Second thing he's not saying, he's not talking about masochism. So he's not saying that we rejoice because of our suffering, as though Christians, when things are bad, when things get really terrible and we have this prolonged experience of suffering, we say, hooray, amazing, it's painful, I'm suffering, let's rejoice. Now, that sounds like a ridiculous thing to do, probably because it is ridiculous, but it's amazing how you can kind of find yourself on that sort of trajectory sometimes, because so often when we suffer in a prolonged sense, sometimes suffering becomes aligned with our sense of identity. We are so closely aligned with suffering that it becomes part of us. And therefore we have this sort of masochism, which means that when we suffer, we're able to rejoice in it because probably it makes us unique, or it means that we have attention, or it becomes a part of our identity. Paul isn't saying that. He's not saying that we're stoic. He's not saying that despite the suffering we're just happy. He's also not saying that we rejoice because of our suffering. Instead, he's saying something really distinct here. Here's what Paul's actually saying. He's saying Christians rejoice in their suffering. Not despite the suffering, not because of the suffering, but in the suffering. What does he mean by that? What Paul means by that is that our source of joy isn't the absence of suffering. It's not only when things are good that Christians are able to rejoice, but also, crucially, our source of joy isn't the presence of things that bring happiness, as though when things are relationally really good around us, we're able to rejoice. Or if our career is on the right career path and we have this sense of purpose in our life, we're able to rejoice. Or if we have money and provision in our life to make us happy and feel like we have all that we need, we're therefore able to rejoice. He's not saying that it's the presence of stuff that makes us happy. Those things aren't bad in and of themselves, but they're transient. We'll notice as we go through life that they're there sometimes and they're not other times. Instead, what Paul is saying is the source of our joy is available to us whether we have those things or not, whether we're in a moment of suffering or not, whether we're in a prolonged time of suffering or not. We are still able to rejoice as Christians. How is he able to say that? It is a ridiculous claim. Here's how he's able to say that. Because the source of our joy is in none of those things. Instead, it's in this, verse 1. Therefore, since we have been justified, he says, by faith. He's essentially summing up the first 4 chapters there. We have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. What does he mean there? What he means is a part of our created identity, a part of who we are, is not satisfied, is not truly alive. It doesn't feel like we're experiencing fullness until we are able to have a relationship with our Father in heaven as though we're his sons and daughters and we're able to receive the unconditional love of God who created us. Until we have that experience, we are not experiencing life in all its fullness. And therefore, that is something, because of what Jesus has done on the cross, that is something that stays with us despite whether we're suffering or not, in spite of our suffering, but also whether we're able to possess the things that would normally make us happy or not. It remains with us the whole time. And what Paul's saying there is, as Christians, when we go through times of suffering, when we don't have the things that ordinarily would make us happy, what we're to do is we're to stand in the reality of the grace that we've received because of Jesus Christ. Verse 2, here's what he says. Through him, Jesus, we've obtained access by faith into this grace in which we stand. We get to be in the presence of God no matter what is going on around us. Christian joy, Paul says, is found in relationship with God. So here's a question for us this morning as we kind of think about this prolonged time that we're going into of things really not returning to normal and things continuing around us and the effects of this disease happening and not seeing kind of this light at the end of the tunnel. How do we get this kind of joy in suffering? How do we obtain this in the Christian sense? How is it that Paul is able to say this? How is it that we're able to see Jesus practice this kind of rejoicing in suffering? How is it we're able to see the early church express this rejoicing, this joy in spite of anything that's going on? Well, the key is in verse 3. And in verse 3, Paul says this. More than that, he says, we rejoice in our sufferings. We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that, he says, suffering produces endurance. And endurance produces character. And character produces hope. We all need hope. So what's the first step? There's a little kind of journey that Paul takes us on here. The first step is we endure. If you want to experience this Christian reality of rejoicing in spite of suffering, rejoicing in our suffering, then firstly, we need to endure. We need to carry on doing the things that enable us to stand in the grace of what Jesus has purchased for us on the cross. We need to carry on doing the basics that enables us to remain in the presence of God, to remain connected to the vine. We have to persevere during times of suffering. Now, here's the thing. It's actually not easy doing that because everything in us, when we suffer, makes us want to stop everything else that's going on. It causes doubt about our faith. It might cause passivity in our faith. It will cause tiredness in our faith. It will cause hopelessness in our faith. And when we experience those things, everything in us will want to stop doing the basics of the Christian life. But what Paul is saying in this moment is we need to endure. We need to persevere. He uses elsewhere this analogy of running a marathon. Now, I've never run a marathon. I never plan to run a marathon. But I have run more than 20 minutes, more than once in my life. And I'm telling you, there's a moment in that 20 minutes where you hit a wall and you have a decision to make. My body, everything in me is telling me, stop running. It's hurting. But you have to face a decision. Am I going to stop and sit down on a bench and give up? Or am I going to push through that moment? Am I going to persevere? Am I going to keep on doing the basics of running? Keep on running so that I can achieve the goal at the end. This is a moment for us as a church and as Christians right now. Are we going to keep on running? Are we going to persevere in our faith? Are we going to keep doing the basics that keeps us connected in our relationship with God so that we can stand in grace? What are the basics? Well, here's the basics, and they're incredibly simple. Basic number one, don't stop praying. Don't stop praying. If you weren't praying before this pandemic hit, start praying. If you were praying before this pandemic hit, don't stop praying. That doesn't mean that our prayers become fake, as though our prayers are exactly the same as they were before and everything's going on around us and we keep praying in the same way. This is why the Psalms are in the Bible. The Psalms are in the Bible because it shows us that we are able to pray despite what is happening around us. We're able to remain in the presence of God despite everything going on because we're able to be real with God in prayer. We're able to pray like the psalmist. And the psalmist, if you've ever read the Psalms, so often David or whoever's writing it is going apoplectic about the suffering around him. He's going, everything is going wrong. The mountains are falling into the sea. Everything is happening around me. Everything is going wrong. I'm going to die. Surely I will die. And then there's always a point in the middle of the psalm where David or whoever wrote it just says, but I know that God is with me. I know that God is good. And therefore, I will be able to get through it. So don't stop praying. Don't stop reading your Bible. You need to keep reading the Bible. If you weren't reading the Bible before this pandemic hit, start reading the Bible. Start with the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's in the middle of the Bible. If you were reading the Bible before this pandemic hit, don't stop reading the Bible. Don't stop doing the basics that keeps us connected to God. When you read the Bible, what you will realize is the people in the Bible experience all manner of suffering. And what they did with that suffering is really important for us to be able to read, because constantly what we learn in the Bible through Jesus and the disciples, particularly in Acts, is that if we are able to stay connected in the presence of God during suffering, then we're able to have that deep sense of joy that Paul is talking about here. Just a little tip on reading the Bible. When you read the Bible, try and do it when you're not distracted. If you can, wake up early in the morning before your mind starts with work or with homeschooling the kids or with doing whatever it is that you need to do, so the mind's a little bit more empty. Spend a moment before you start just giving everything to God, being still in God's presence. Read a bit of the Bible. Doesn't need to be lots. Can be a passage, can be a verse, can be a chapter. As you're reading it, ask God, what are you saying to me through this scripture? What are you saying to me in this passage? And what you'll find is a certain verse will jump out, even if it's just the verse that confuses you. And then start to meditate on that verse. Start to ask God, what do you mean by that? What exactly are you saying? And then crucial thing, once you've got it, once you feel like God has spoken some truth through the Bible, say to God, what is it that you want me to do now? How should I act different now that you've spoken to me through that passage? Don't stop praying. Don't stop reading the Bible. Final thing, do not stop worshipping. Don't stop worshipping. Keep worshipping. Persevere in worshipping. Why? Because as we worship, we find that the truths about God start to infect our whole being and our mind, and we're transformed by the renewing of our mind. We've talked about this before. As you worship, something profound happens, and our whole mindset shifts at the same time. I've always wondered, in fact, it's good we sang it this morning. I've always wondered, or actually I haven't always wondered, the first time I heard the song, You Are Good, you are good, good, oh, I thought, how can we possibly sing You Are Good that many times in one song? Why did no nobody stopped this song from being published. They are the most benign lyrics I have ever heard in my life. You are good, good, mindless. Oh, it goes on and on and on. And then I realized when you actually worship with that song, what happens is you're singing a simple truth about God, and it starts to infect your entire thinking and your heart and your mind and your body and your soul. It doesn't need to be a complicated worship song. You don't need to go through the whole theology of the New Testament to be able to worship truth during this time. It's the simplest truths that we need to hear right now. And in fact, that song is perfect when we're going through suffering, because the one thing we need to know right now as we go through this moment is that God is good, regardless of what's happening around us. Don't stop worshiping. Don't stop reading your Bible. Don't stop praying. The basics, persevere, endure in the basics. If we want to have joy in suffering, we need to stick with all the things that enable us to stand in grace. And as I said, this isn't easy. I'm not saying this is easy. This is actually particularly hard. But we need to keep doing it. And here's the prize if we can keep doing it. Here's what will happen if we keep doing it. Verse 4, there's this little journey that we go on. If we endure, if we keep on doing those simple things, Paul says this: endurance produces character, and character produces hope. Endurance produces character. Character produces hope. What is hope? It's basically good stuff that we're hoping for. It's good stuff that we hope will happen in the future. In a normal sense, we hope that we will have fulfillment in our career. We hope that we will find meaning in our career and purpose in our career. We hope for fulfilling relationships in life. We hope for money so that we're able to be comfortable in our life. We hope for all manner of possessions so that we are able to enjoy life. What does hope mean in the Christian sense? Well, hope in the Christian sense means there's an expectation that one day the fullness of God will come to earth as it is in heaven, and there'll be no more tears, there'll be no more crying, there'll be no more suffering, and the presence of God will be with us in fullness, and God will make everything right again. He'll join heaven and earth together. See, there's something about Christian joy, being able to rejoice as Christians, that isn't just unusual because we're able to do it when we're suffering. What's remarkable about Christian joy is that there's something about suffering that actually enhances our joy. When we suffer, and we don't suffer because God sends it, God doesn't cause the suffering in the same way He hasn't caused this pandemic, but God uses suffering so that we are able to produce character and end up in hope. What does character mean? Well, character essentially is when we're tested and refined and we're found out to be all right. Essentially, someone of good character goes through a test of some sort and they emerge having done the right thing. Now, in the biblical sense, when Paul talks about character, it's a little bit like gold in a furnace. I don't know anything about gold, but I'm told that when you put gold in a really hot furnace, it's under immense pressure and immense heat. And the reason they do it is to refine it. So all the dross, all the rubbish stuff that's attached itself to the gold gets burnt off when it's put in a furnace. Now here's the point. This is how character is produced in us as Christians. In suffering, if we endure, if we keep on doing the basics of being connected to God, if we stand in the grace of what Jesus has done for us, other competing sources of joy and other competing sources of hope essentially get burnt off in the fire. Whatever it was that we were standing on before suddenly crumbles away beneath our feet. And if we've endured, if we persevered in the things that are eternal, the things that connect us to God, then we'll find ourselves stood on the most solid ground we could possibly stand on. Suffering enhances our joy. Have you ever seen a Christian who really understands this get diagnosed with a terminal illness and then die as a result of the illness? I have. And it's remarkable to watch someone who really understands what Paul is talking about here, to persevere in things that have eternal value when everything else is falling apart, when everything before they would have put their strength in and put their trust in is completely taken away from them. It is infectious because they are so connected to the presence of God. That refinement process has burnt off all of the other stuff in the worldly sense. All they're left with is this incredible gold, and it's inspiring to watch. I think as a church we're going through a bit of a refining process at the moment. Before the lockdown, it felt like we were starting to get a bit of momentum. On Sundays, we were talking about having to buy new chairs, and we were talking about potentially going to 2 services because it kept growing Sunday morning. And a lot of the emphasis, really, pre-lockdown, was on Sunday mornings and the excitement of Sunday mornings and everything that was going on. And since the lockdown, we've obviously transitioned to doing virtual service on YouTube. And there's many things that I find depressing about YouTube. The first is, whenever I watch a YouTube, I'm probably playing on my phone or doing something else. You're all probably playing on your phone right now and not connecting with anything that's going on. I can see you if you're doing that, and I know who you are. But also I found out that on YouTube, apparently, you only need to watch the stream for 10 seconds in order to count as a hit, which is so depressing. It means nobody is watching any of these. All the Christians getting excited about revival because suddenly their streams are jumping to 700 people watching. They aren't watching. It's 10 seconds. I'm being told by her now not to go too far down that line. The point is, we're being refined as a church. What does that mean? That means that the real stuff, so the stuff other than the excitement on Sundays, which isn't bad in and of itself, but like the excitement of being together and of growth and of momentum, has been completely taken away from us. And here's the point: what remains? What is the gold that we're left with? We talked all the time about it being a church for the Monday to Saturday and coming together on Sunday just to celebrate. In reality, church was really about Sunday. And then Monday to Saturday, we didn't really know what was going on. This has totally flipped that on its head, and it's refining us in the process. And we're realizing what's really important is how we're living out our faith Monday to Saturday. There was a word spoken over the church a while ago about it being like a swimming pool. And you've got the shallow end, you've got the deep end. The water represents the presence of God, and most of the noise and the chaos is in the shallow end. If you spend too much time in the shallow end, you'll get worn out because it's chaos and it feels exhausting and there's just lots of noise. However, if you go into the deep end, people are just casually getting on with what they're doing because they're immersed in the presence of God. Our job as church leaders is to take you from the shallow end into the deep end. That is the refining process that Paul's talking about here. We're supposed to go from the shallows of being in the presence of God into the depths of being in the presence of God. What happens in that process? Character is produced. We have to persevere. And as a result, at the end, we're refined to the point where the gold is left and we have genuine hope, the most real hope, the eternal hope of knowing that God loves us, that he's our Father in heaven, and that he's proud of us, and that he wants the best for us, and he wants us to be all who we're supposed to be. So character leads to hope. And in the final part of this passage here, it says this: hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. God's love is poured into us. If we can go on that process, if in suffering we're able to endure, persevere, keep on doing the basics of connecting with God, character will be produced as a result. We'll then experience the hope. And this is what hope does. Hope feels, it's not just an intellectual hope, it feels like the presence of God, the love of God is being poured into our hearts. Who does not want that? To have God's love poured into our hearts on a daily basis, constantly, as we go through any trial, any suffering. So we're going to do that right now. So why don't we shut our eyes? Wherever you are, throw the kids in a different room, put Peppa Pig on, shut your eyes, and open your hands out in front of you as though you're going to receive a gift. And the gift we're asking for right now is God's love to be poured into our hearts. And I want you to pray first. Say, really simple prayer. Holy Spirit, will you pour your love into my heart now? And I'm going to agree with your prayer. Holy Spirit, fill us with your love now. And let's just wait. There's no rush. Come, Holy Spirit. More of your presence now. Bless what you're doing, Lord. Let's increase your presence now. As you sense God starting to pour his love into your heart, ask him for more. This is how Jesus taught us to pray. He said, how much more will your Father in heaven, who is perfect, who loves you, give you his presence, his love, when you ask. So we boldly ask for more now. More of your love. More of your grace. I feel like God's just asked me to say this. If you're with someone watching this right now and they've had a bad week, could you just lay your hand on their shoulder and ask for more of God's love? If you're alone watching this, just keep connecting. God doesn't need someone to do that. I just ask, Lord, that you would keep pouring out your love on those who are watching this who aren't with anyone. But if you are and you know the other person's had a bad week, just lay your hand on the shoulder and just bless what God's doing and ask for more. More of your hope, more of your love now. And don't rush away, there's no rush. Just pour out your love now, Lord. Just pour out your love, Lord. Bless what you're doing. Bless what you're doing. Okay, just keep receiving. Lucy's going to sing. Feel free to join in, but if you are feeling like there's just these waves of love coming over you, just keep asking for more. Just let the worship wash over you. It's the waves of God's love. Just keep pouring your love into the hearts of those watching now, Lord Jesus, as we worship. Come, Holy Spirit, just increase now.